Next, I wanted to go to water conservation. And in 2009, the California legislature adopted legislation. It was part of a whole package of legislation surrounding the Sacramento Delta, and that was SBX 77. And what that legislation did is it set a mandate for water agencies to reduce per capita consumption by 20% by 2020. And actually that was Governor Schwarzenegger's goal, and they decided to roll that into the legislation, and it sounds pretty good too. So 20% by 2020. And for our San Diego region, we included agricultural water in our overall reduction goal, and that would bring us to 167 gallon per capita per day. And there's always this talk about, well, high per capita bad, low per capita good, and that's not necessarily true. It relates to the different types of water uses you have within your system. And so that's actually, for what we have, a reasonable number. So this is, where are we today? When you look at the water conservation efforts that we've had since the drought, we're actually at 141 gallon per capita per day. So some people are going, wait a minute, we're done. We don't have to do anything else. We're all good. But that's not necessarily the case. We do have to adjust this data for weather, and then we also have to look at, if we go flashback to the last drought, and we had the same type of drop-off in water use, and then after the drought we saw a rebound. So I think the important thing is that when we focus our conservation programs, we're going to focus on preventing that rebound. We could sit back and then everybody, the water use goes back up, and then we all pay everybody again to bring it back down. But it's a lot better to focus on keeping that water use at the level it is right now. And so our programs are really focused on instilling that conservation ethic with the customer. We're also looking at some collaborative approaches. The regional board is really going after the stormwater co-permittees to limit runoff off the property. And so there's a real opportunity to partner with those co-permittees, and that will happen in some of our programs going forward. And there's going to be a real strong emphasis on the outdoor, because if we put less water on the ground, that's going to ultimately improve the stormwater quality. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening with Graywater, because a lot of people are asking, hey, what about Graywater? I want to do Graywater. What are you doing for Graywater? So there's actually a lot going on with that, and the California legislature has a number of bills that have been following each other. And so the first one was in 2008, and what it did was it required a Housing and Community Development Department to develop standards for graywater, for residential graywater use, and then the Building Standard Commission adopted it. And I will say we participated in that process, and it's actually the most efficient state agency I've ever seen go to work, because they got these out as emergency standards. It made it a lot more open for graywater and residential. I'll talk a little bit about that. And there was a lot of people at that time who had non-residential structures, and they were coming to the meetings and they said, hey, what about us? You forgot us in this. And so there was legislation in 2010, and now they're adopting standards for non-residential buildings, and there's another legislation pending governor's signature that will actually make it even easier for graywater by limiting some of the local discretion to be from being more stringent. And this is probably the most key provision in those standards, is that if you have a washing machine system, no pumping, very simple gravity system, all subsurface irrigation, there is no permit requirement. So it really does open the door to a lot of legal graywater use. And a little bit on stormwater, that's the other one I hear a lot about. It's like, we should capture all our stormwater. We need to capture that stormwater. And I know up in the LA area, there's a big push towards it, because if they can get that stormwater into the ground and into their groundwater basin, they can pump it out. In San Diego, we're not going to have a benefit of that because of our groundwater basins, and there is some limited benefit to capturing it for landscape use, which is where it's allowed now, and there's not even a permit requirement, because if you look at these charts, the one on the left is our rainwater. The one on the right is the demand for water on your landscape irrigation. And you can see they are just opposite. It rains in the winter, and we need the water in the summer. So the only way you're going to really make use of that water is if you build a big storage tank to put it in. So that is, it's a little different than Texas, where they have monsoonal rain. So we are a little bit different in San Diego. But one thing I will say is there's, for example, the Surfrider has a training program on stormwater capture that talks about rain gardens and maximizing what goes in on your property, and then you match that up with plants that don't use a lot of water, and then you have a landscape that needs no water. So we think that's a good idea and something everybody should be doing. And the last thing I want to mention is there is new legislation which may change this formula a little bit, and it's waiting for the governor's signature. But what it's probably the biggest thing it's going to do is allow indoor use of stormwater, and which is not currently allowed, because the plumbing code requires everything coming in your house to be potable water. So it'll be able to be used for non-potable purposes like toilet flushing, and probably a big one is you can use it in your washing machine. So this may make it viable to be capturing that water and using it indoors. And it also has licensed contractors installing rainwater capture systems. So that's something to keep an eye on and watch. But basically, we're going to be doing a lot. The agencies are doing a lot of effort in developing local water supplies to make us more reliable, and I think the customers are going to be doing a lot too.